Hi, I'm the Strenuous Objector, lawyer and overthinker of pop culture, and I'm here to take a look at your favorite movies and TV shows and ask the question, is that legal? Today, I'd like to call the case of the state versus Vincent Gambini. Now, for those who haven't seen My Cousin Vinny, it's the story of two young men from New York who are put on trial in Alabama for the murder of a store clerk. When they call home to get money for an attorney, Billy's mom sends down his cousin, Vincent Gambini, also known as Vinny, to represent the two of them. As the trial goes on, though, the state's case brings up questions about cars, and to rebut the state, Vinny puts up his fiancée, Mona Lisa Vito, as an expert witness in general automotive knowledge. And that brings us to the question for today. Was it legal to use Mona Lisa as an expert witness? Now, unlike other discussions, this question is a little more specific than usual. That's because this question deals more with the admissibility of a witness. And those types of rulings by the court tend to be very fact-specific. So it'll be important to look specifically at Mona Lisa and her qualifications. As for the relevant law, the movie takes place in the fictional Beecham County, Alabama. So we'll be using Alabama statutes and case law for this discussion. As always, this is not a review of the movie. I'm just deciding if what they did was legal. That's it. Before we get too into the law, though, I want to have a brief talk about the law and evidence as a whole. When people think of laws, they usually think of them in terms of legal and illegal, like this series. But when it comes to evidence at a trial, lawyers normally talk about things in terms of admissible and inadmissible. Webster defines admissible as able to be admitted or allowed. And that's important here, because in the same way it'd be illegal to break the law, when a court lets in evidence that's inadmissible or not able to be allowed in, that court could end up dealing with all kinds of trouble. Specifically, their case getting overturned. When you hear about a defendant going free because of a technicality, one of the possible reasons is that the court allowed something into a trial that was inadmissible, and by letting that evidence in, the defendant didn't get a fair trial. We'll save a more thorough discussion of why certain things are admissible and others are inadmissible for another day. But I do want you to keep this all in the back of your mind for now. Focusing on Mona Lisa, we first have to ask ourselves, what is an expert witness? Well, to find that answer, we actually have two places to look. Alabama Code Section 12-21-160 and Alabama Rules of Evidence Rule 702. Now, they both say almost the exact same thing, but the Alabama Code actually has an additional subsection that says that if there's anything inconsistent between that section and the Rules of Evidence, then the Alabama Code supersedes it. So we'll focus on using that section to avoid any potential conflicts. Now, Section 12-21-160 says that if scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge will assist the trier of fact to understand the evidence or to determine a fact in issue, a witness qualified as an expert by knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education may testify thereto in the form of an opinion or otherwise. So imagine you're sitting on a jury for a murder trial, and the prosecutor wants to start talking about DNA evidence. Well, unless you're a scientist, or at least someone who pretends to be online, you probably don't know much about what DNA is, or how it ends up transferring onto things, or even why it's important for that case. So what the state would do is bring in someone from the state crime lab, or even an independent scientist, to come in and explain all that stuff to you and the other people on the jury. That crime lab tech or scientist would be an expert witness and could then testify to their opinion about any scientific, technical, or other specialized knowledge because they have knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education that allows them to testify about their opinion on evidence that relates to what they were qualified as an expert in. Now, generally, people tend to think of experts as having some scientific knowledge, but it doesn't have to be. As stated in Smoot v. State, a 1987 Court of Criminal Appeals of Alabama case, an expert witness is anyone whose opportunity or means of knowledge in a specialized art or science is better than that of the average juror or witness. So how do we determine if Mona Lisa qualifies as someone whose knowledge in a specialized art or science is better than that of the average juror or witness? Well, to do that, we just have to look at her voir dire. But first, what is a voir dire? Or, as some call it,
Voir dire.
So voir dire.
voir dire.
Voir dire.
So voir dire.
Anyway, when a witness normally goes to the stand, they just get sworn in and then asked direct examination questions to give their testimony. But when it comes to an expert witness, they must show the court that they meet the requirements of the law before they can actually testify to their opinion as an expert witness. If opposing counsel disagrees or is skeptical, as was the case in the movie, they can ask additional questions in order to try and show that the witness does not qualify as an expert.
Ms. Vito, being an expert on general automotive knowledge, can you tell me what would the correct ignition timing be on a 1955 Bel Air Chevrolet with a 327 cubic inch engine and a 4-barrel carburetor?
It's a bullshit question.
Does that mean that you can't answer it?
It's a bullshit question. It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
Your Honor, I move to disqualify Ms. Vito as an expert witness.
Can you answer the question?
No, it is a trick question.
Why is it a trick question?
Watch this.
Because Chevy didn't make a 327 in 55. The 327 didn't come out till 62. And it wasn't offered in the Bel Air with a 4-barrel carb till 64. However, in 1964, the correct ignition timing would be 4 degrees before top dead center.
Well, she's acceptable, Your Honor.
Though usually that results in criticism of their credentials, and not so much quiz questions like in the movie. That's what we call a voir dire of an expert witness. So, back to where we were. We can see from her voir dire that while many people may know a lot about cars, Mona Lisa has extensive and detailed knowledge of cars that would go beyond that of the average juror or witness. She also clearly stated that her family is full of mechanics, that she's worked as a mechanic, that she's done a great deal of mechanic work, and that she has extensive knowledge of cars and car history. Using both a plain reading of Section 160 as well as the court's ruling in Smoot, we can see that Mona Lisa would qualify as an expert witness. But what about the opinion she gave? What could that be based on? Would she have been allowed to just make it up as she goes along or guess? Well, no.
No.
In fact, there are 3 extra requirements that must be met before the expert's testimony would be admissible. 1. The testimony is based on sufficient facts or data. 2. The testimony is the product of reliable principles and methods. And 3. The witness has applied the principles and methods reliably to the facts of the case. These are in effect safeguards to make sure your friend Johnny, who claims to be an expert in UFOs, doesn't get up and try to testify as an expert at a trial. Now, looking at this case, Mona Lisa used photos from the scene and combined that with her prior knowledge of cars in order to reach her conclusion about the make of the car that left the tire marks. As the law required, she even explained how she reached her conclusion using methods that were even verified by the state's expert. As such, Mona Lisa's opinion, or as she called it,
It's a fact.
appears to be well within the realms of what an expert could testify to. As a final note, though, most states actually require you to give some notice or warning beforehand if you plan to use an expert witness, and provide all copies of reports and tests if you do. Alabama happens to be one of those states, and has 2 code sections that apply. Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure, Rule 16.1, which is discovery by defense, and Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure, Rule 16.2, which is discovery by the state. Now, under both rules, the opposing side would have to give copies of an expert's reports within 14 days of trial upon request. But here's the thing. Vinny objects to the use of the state's expert witness, and the judge overrules it. So Vinny then calls Mona Lisa Vito as a rebuttal witness in response to the state's expert witness. Under those circumstances, Vinny clearly had no idea he was going to call Mona Lisa until that moment. And so the court, in its discretion, could allow her testimony without any notice or warning, which it does. In the end, though, after reviewing all the facts and the law, I find that in the case of the state versus Vincent Gambini, Mona Lisa Vito would be qualified as an expert witness, and thus her testimony about her opinion to Billy's car not being the right vehicle to make the tire marks would be admissible. Or, in other words, legal, at least under Alabama law. But remember, this is just in relation to Mona Lisa Vito. Every expert witness has to be viewed on a case-by-case basis, following whatever law is relevant for that state. With all that said and done, I'm the Strenuous Objector, and court is adjourned. Now, if you liked the video and want to see more, hit subscribe or head to the comments and let me know what movie or TV show you want me to take a look at next. All case and statute citations are in the description. Also, all the information in the video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as actual legal advice. If you have a legal question or problem, please contact an attorney near you.